I never meant to find the tape. It wasn't part of the assignment, and St. Augustine College had stopped offering music classes decades before I was even born. I was only supposed to digitize a few old faculty records for the archive project, a mindless, quiet job that helped pay rent. But that afternoon, in the cold, dust-choked basement beneath the library, something drew me toward the back shelf. It was hidden behind a stack of water-damaged enrollment forms, wrapped in yellowed paper, brittle as old skin. A reel-to-reel tape, unlabeled except for a faded strip of masking tape across the front with 4 words written in shaky black ink. Bell Tower Recordings, 1972. The year froze me. 1972 was the year the music department shut down without explanation. Professors retired early, students transferred. The bell tower was sealed. Campus lore blamed everything from faulty wiring to a gas leak, but the older janitors always shook their heads when they heard the story and muttered things like, "That tower had problems long before that year." I turned the tape over in my hands. The reel felt heavier than it should have, as if the sound inside it was weighted by time. Something old, something that wasn't ready to be forgotten. I don't know why, but the moment I touched it, the temperature around me dropped. The hum of the basement lights dimmed, like the room itself was holding its breath. Part of me wanted to leave it on the shelf and pretend I'd never seen it. But the other part, the curious, irrational part, needed to know what was on it, why it had been hidden, why it felt like someone had gone out of their way to bury it. I carried it upstairs to the audio lab, a cramped room with peeling acoustic tiles and a reel deck that barely worked. As the machine clicked to life and the tape began to spin, the speakers crackled. I expected music, maybe the choir rehearsals or the sound of the bells echoing over campus. But what came out instead was breathing. Slow, uneven, not the breathing of someone rehearsing or speaking, but the kind of breath a person makes when they're hiding or terrified. And then, beneath the static, I heard something else. A voice. So faint, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A woman whispered, "Please, don't let him ring the bell again." My blood ran cold, because the tape wasn't just a recording. It felt like a warning.
Professor Raymond Hale was the type of man students remembered long after graduation. Every old article I found described him the same way. Soft-spoken, brilliant, patient, devoted to his choir like they were his own family. But the journal I found tucked beneath the tapes, its cover worn, edges curled with moisture, told a story that never made the college brochures. In his own handwriting, Hale admitted something no one else knew. The choir had changed in the weeks before the incident. They had stopped sounding human. The early entries were harmless. Notes about attendance, upcoming recitals, microphone issues, and tuning problems. But slowly, the writing shifted, jittery, frantic, letters pressed so hard into the page that the pen marks bled through. I dismissed them at 6:10, but the singing continued until nearly 7. I heard it through the stairwell. That wasn't the students. Those weren't their voices. Another entry. When the girls practiced the descant, there was a third harmony above them, high, thin. It sounded like a child humming into a metal pipe. Then, something is wrong with the tower. When I lock the door, it feels like someone locks it again from the inside. By late February 1972, Hale's handwriting had deteriorated into trembling slants and ink smears. The man who once conducted with perfect precision now wrote like he was running out of time. He described hearing whispers on the top floor, voices that didn't match any student, breathing behind him when he climbed the narrow wooden steps, shadows against the bell itself, swaying even when the wind was still. He begged the administration to let him move rehearsals elsewhere, but they denied him. The acoustics were unmatched. The donors loved the tower. "Don't be superstitious," they told him. "You're tired. Take a break." But Hale didn't need a break. He needed someone to believe him. The final journal entry, dated March 3, 1972, was written in a shaking scroll that slanted off the page like he was writing during an earthquake. "The bells won't stop. They're calling for me. I hear the choir when no one is here. I hear them in my sleep. Something is in the tower, and it wants to be heard." There was no signature, just a dark brown smear across the bottom corner, dried and cracked like old blood. 3 hours after that entry, the bells began ringing uncontrollably. 6 straight hours. No one saw Hale again. The college sealed the tower the next morning. I waited until after sunset to listen to the first reel again. Something about daylight made the tape feel harmless, like an artifact of another life. But at night, the sound inside it felt alive. The audio lab was empty, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing weakly overhead. I threaded the reel, hit play, and braced myself. At first, the tape delivered exactly what the label promised, a choir rehearsal. Faint at first, then clearer as the machine warmed up. Young voices rising in perfect harmony, echoing through the tower's stone interior. I imagined students standing in a half circle, reading sheet music from trembling stands, eyes lifted toward Professor Hale. It almost felt peaceful. But around the 20-minute mark, the recording twisted. The choir's pitch began to slide, slowly at first, like the reel was warping, then suddenly in sharp, unnatural drops. The sopranos didn't sound like sopranos anymore. Their voices deepened, vibrating like cello strings played underwater. And beneath the choir, faint but unmistakable, footsteps, heavy ones, climbing the spiral stairs. There should have been no one else in the tower. On the tape, Hale's voice appeared next, distant, as if he wasn't near the microphone. "Who's there?" The footsteps paused, then resumed, faster this time, like something crawling instead of walking. I felt my pulse spike. My hands hovered over the stop button, but curiosity held me in place. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until it sounded like the recorder itself was being dragged toward the stairs. Then, a single bell tolled. Clear, sharp, metal striking air like a blade through glass. I flinched so hard the chair skidded backward. The bell tone rang far longer than a real bell should, vibrating the speakers, the desk, the air around me. It felt wrong, like the tape wasn't playing a memory, but reenacting something still happening somewhere above me. And then, The screaming started, not from the choir, not from Hale, but from something below the microphone, rising in pitch, spiraling, overlapping itself until it became unbearable, like multiple mouths screaming through a narrow pipe. The sound twisted into static, or maybe the reel tried to protect itself by distorting the horror it captured. When the tape finally fell silent, I sat frozen. But the room did not go quiet. The ringing continued, soft, faint, coming not from the speakers, but from somewhere inside the walls of the lab, as if the bell tower itself had heard the tape awaken and was answering. I shut off the machine, ripped the tape from the deck, and stuffed it back into the box like it could bite me. My heart pounded in my ears, but underneath it, I swear I heard something else. A child's voice, barely audible, breathing through the stillness that followed. We told him not to come back. And for the first time that night, I wondered whether the tape was a recording at all, or an invitation.
It took me almost an hour to gather the courage to return to the bell tower. By the time I stepped outside, night had swallowed the campus whole. The air was unnaturally still, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. Even the usual hum of distant traffic seemed muted, as if sound itself refused to come anywhere near that part of campus. The tower stood at the far end of the courtyard, a sharp silhouette against the pale blue moonlight. Its windows were black squares, empty and watching. No lights, no movement, but a presence heavy enough to feel in my bones. Every step I took toward it felt like I was pushing against something thick and invisible, like walking deeper into water. The wooden board sealing the tower door looked older in the dark, warped and cracked, but still firmly nailed shut. They weren't just blocking the entrance, they looked like a desperate attempt to keep something inside. When I touched one of the planks, it was cold. Not night air cold, freezing, as if the wood were holding winter inside it. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, so faint I thought it was my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. A soft creaking, rhythmic, slow, like the swaying of a rope under a heavy weight. The sound was coming from behind the door, inside the tower. I pressed my ear against the boards. That was when everything changed. A low hum vibrated through the wood. At first, I thought it was wind passing through the cracks, but no, the sound was too controlled, layered, and disturbingly familiar. It was music, a choir, soft, breathy voices humming in harmony, except there was no rise or fall, no breath, no human imperfection. It was a perfect, continuous tone, almost synthetic in how still it was. Then, beneath the harmony, a whisper, close enough to touch, as if someone stood inches behind the door. "We still sing for him." I jerked back, stumbling into the dead leaves at my feet. My flashlight flickered violently, failing to stay lit as if the air was swallowing its beam. The temperature dropped so sharply that my breath fogged in front of me. The boards on the tower door bowed inward, as if something leaned against them from inside. I told myself to leave, to turn around, to run back into the safety of lights and people and warmth. But something held me there, a feeling like the tower was waiting for me. Then I felt warm breath on the back of my neck. A woman's voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, heart ready to burst, but the courtyard was empty. No footsteps, no shadows, not even wind. Yet the whisper hadn't come from the tower. It had come from behind me. The bells suddenly rang, one soft toll that rolled through the campus like thunder underwater. Not loud, but deep, felt rather than heard. My knees buckled. I ran, not because of the sound, but because as the bell tolled, the locked tower door shifted. Something inside had moved closer, and it wasn't done with me yet. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the faint echo of that bell, one single toll vibrating through the bones of the campus like it was warning me or calling me or both. I sat in the archive room until sunrise, the boxed tapes lined in front of me like a jury waiting to give a verdict. Part of me wanted to throw them all out, to erase them from existence, but another part, a darker, deeper curiosity, pulled me toward the reel marked simply Tape 2. This one felt different the moment I touched it. The reel was colder, the metal slightly warped, and the labels smeared as if someone had written it in a hurry or with trembling hands. When I placed it onto the machine, the deck let out a groan, almost like it objected to being used again. The tape began with silence, not the silence of empty space, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a room holding its breath. Then came the static, slow, pulsing, like radio interference, but beneath the hiss was something unmistakably human, breathing, shallow, fast, as if the person holding the recorder was terrified but trying not to make a sound. Seconds later, a voice emerged, not Professor Hale's, not any student's, something layered, something wrong. It sounded like dozens of voices speaking at once, each slightly out of sync, creating a warped, echoing chorus that scraped against my nerves. "Professor Hale, we're still here." The hairs on my arms stood upright. The voice wasn't pleading, it wasn't angry, it was expectant, like a group waiting for someone to keep a promise. The chorus continued. "We're still singing. We never stopped. Come listen." The pitch bent downward, twisting into something hollow, as if the voices were being dragged through metal pipes. And then suddenly, 3 bell tolls. Not from the tape. They rang inside the room. The audio lab vibrated, dust falling from ceiling tiles. The light above me flickered violently. My chair rattled beneath me. I slapped the stop button, but the tape kept playing. The wheels spun faster, the reel tightening as if someone else was pulling it from the inside of the machine. Panicking, I yanked the power cord from the wall. The lights died. The tape kept spinning. In the darkness, the bell rang a 4th time, low, deep, and impossibly close. I backed away, heart crashing against my ribs, but tripped over a box behind me. The moment I hit the floor, the spinning reel screeched to a halt. The room fell silent. Then, a soft whisper slipped through the dark, close enough that it felt like it brushed the side of my face. "You hear us now." I scrambled out of the lab, slamming the door behind me. I didn't turn the lights back on. I didn't look back. All I knew was this: the tower wasn't just making sounds. It was answering, and it knew I was listening.
I didn't return to my dorm that night. Something in me was afraid to be alone in a room with 4 walls and a ceiling. Places where sound echoes, where whispers could crawl through the dark without warning. So instead, I found myself locked inside a small study booth on the 3rd floor of the archive building. The professor's journal spread open beneath the flickering fluorescent light. I told myself I was reading out of obligation, out of academic duty. But I knew the truth. I was trying to understand what was happening to me. The earlier entries from Professor Hale were almost normal. Lesson plans, notes about troublesome singers, even the occasional sarcastic remark about the administration. But as the dates crept toward March 1972, the tone shifted drastically. The pen strokes grew heavier, the lines more slanted, like the writing itself was collapsing under the weight of something unseen. One entry caught my attention. A short line, nothing more. They follow me when I leave the tower. I shivered. Not because of the words, but because the page beneath that line was smeared with something brown, something hardened. I forced myself to turn to the next page. They don't use their own voices anymore. They use mine. I hear myself in the harmonies. I hear myself crying for help. My breath hitched. Something about that felt too familiar. Then came the final entry, the one dated just hours before the incident. The paper was creased, wrinkled, as if Hale had been gripping it too tightly while writing. The bells won't stop. I hear them when I close my eyes. I hear them when I blink. They want me to join them. God, what have I done? Below that, the ink changed color, darker, thicker, as if diluted with something wet. The last line was scratched so hard into the page the paper nearly tore. When the bells ring 6 times, run. I swallowed hard. The bells I'd heard earlier that night, the ones that rang inside the audio lab, had tolled 4 times. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. A loose page, folded and shoved deep into the back of the journal, almost invisible beneath the binding. I pulled it free. It wasn't written in ink. It was written in charcoal. Jagged, frantic strokes. They aren't trapped in the tower. The tower just makes it easier for them to speak. Underneath that were 4 fingerprints in the same brown substance. I shut the journal. My hands were trembling, my breath fogged in the warm booth air. The bells had rung 4 times, 2 more to go, and the tower was no longer waiting for me to come to it. It was coming for me. By the next morning, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't done anything except replay the sound of those bells in my mind over and over, wondering if I imagined it, hoping I had, knowing I hadn't. But something else lingered even stronger than fear. A pull, a weight, an invisible pressure guiding me back toward the tower, like a hand on the back of my neck. I told myself I was going for answers. Truthfully, I was going because I was already beyond the point of turning back. The campus was nearly empty when I approached the tower again. A gray, apathetic sky hung low, swallowing the sun and leaving the world tinted in the same lifeless color as old photographs. The wind didn't blow, birds didn't chirp. Even the traffic from the main road sounded distant, as if muffled under heavy cloth. As I reached the base of the tower, I noticed something that hadn't been there the night before. The boards sealing the door were cracked open. Not broken, not smashed, just slightly parted, as if someone inside had gently pushed them aside to make room for a single person to slip through. A single person like me. My breath hitched. The air felt heavier, colder. I took one step closer and felt the temperature drop sharply. the same suffocating chill from the audio lab when the tape refused to spin. I forced myself to lean forward, pressing my hand against the wood. It wasn't cold. It was warm, like someone had been touching it from the other side. I swallowed hard and reached into my bag for the portable recorder I'd borrowed from the media department. If Hale had recorded something in here 50 years ago, maybe I could too. Maybe whatever haunted him would reveal itself the same way it did to him. My hand shook as I clicked the recorder on. A small red light blinked to life. "I know someone's here," I whispered, my voice thinner than I intended. "If you can hear me, speak." For a moment, there was nothing but the faint hum of the recorder. Then, the tower answered. The boards rattled softly, not from wind, not from force, but from something moving just behind the door. A scraping sound followed, like knife nails dragging across stone. Then a second sound joined it. Breathing. Shallow, shaky breaths, not from one person, but several, layered, overlapping, like a crowd pressed together, suffocating in a narrow space. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the recorder. The breathing stopped. Silence filled the courtyard, thick, pressing, expectant. Then, from high above, the bell gave a faint metallic twitch. Not a toll, not a ring, just the soft suggestion of movement, as if something had pressed a hand against it gently. A voice slid down the inside of the tower, slipping through the cracks between the boards, brushing my ears like cold fingers. "Come listen." My knees nearly buckled. The whisper was not angry, not desperate. It was inviting. The recorder in my hand crackled and sputtered. A second voice bled through the speaker, a child's whisper, trembling but clear. "Don't leave us again." Again. The word hit me with a force that stole the air from my lungs. I stumbled backward, heart drowning in panic. But something kept me from running. Something deeper, like memory or recognition. The tower wasn't just responding anymore. It was watching, waiting, and now that it knew my voice, it wasn't about to let me go.
I don't remember walking back to the audio lab. One moment, I was standing at the base of the tower, heart collapsing under the weight of those whispers, and the next, I was pushing open the lab door with trembling fingers, my body moving on instinct. Maybe fear dragged me there, maybe curiosity, or maybe something else guided me. Whatever the reason, the moment I stepped inside, the temperature plummeted. Frost crawled across the windows like thin white veins. The lights flickered overhead, floating in and out of existence like they couldn't decide whether to stay or go. The real deck sat in the center of the room, waiting for me. A single tape lay beside it, unlabeled, untouched. Except it wasn't. There was dust on every surface in that room except the tape. Something had handled it recently. My hands shook as I set the reel into the machine. I hadn't even pressed play yet when the room shifted. The air thickened, the walls creaked inward, the floorboards gave a long, low groan like the building was exhaling. And then I pressed the button. Silence. A long, suffocating silence, but it wasn't empty. It felt like standing in the center of a dark auditorium, every seat filled with people watching, waiting, breathing softly in the dark. Then the tape began. The first sound was footsteps, slow, dragging, ascending a staircase. The wooden echo of each step sounded so close, so detailed, that I glanced back at the door, half expecting someone to appear. Then breathing, labored, pained, as if the recorder was being carried by someone running out of strength. Next came a voice. Not Hale's, not a student's, not a stranger's. It was mine. My voice, raw, trembling, afraid, whispered through the speaker. "I told you not to come here." I staggered back, nearly tripping over a chair. My throat tightened, my mind scrambled. I had never been inside that tower with a recorder. I had never said those words, yet somehow I recognized the strain in the voice, the panic in each breath. It was me. The tape continued. Heavier breathing, footsteps accelerating, the recorder scraping against rough stone. Then a new sound layered in, choral humming. Soft at first, then rising with each passing second, harmony swelling like a tidal wave of voices pressing against the inside of the tower. The pitch bent upward until it stopped sounding human altogether. And then, the bells. 6 tolls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each toll deeper than thunder, each one vibrating through the floor, through the walls, through my chest. The lights flickered violently, screaming in white flashes. And then the tape cut to static. But beneath that static was a whisper, quiet, trembling, almost tender. "Come join us." The speakers hissed and popped. The tape spun faster, until the wheel blurred. I tried to stop it, but the machine felt locked, frozen under someone else's control. The room vibrated, papers fluttered from shelves like frightened birds. The static deepened, and in its depths I heard something I will never forget. My own scream. Raw, distant, drowning. The reel snapped. The machine died. Silence fell so suddenly it bruised the air. My breath came in short bursts. My chest burned. The room felt smaller. The walls felt closer. And then the final horror. A fresh tape slid off the shelf behind me and landed at my feet. No hand touched it. No wind blew. It simply dropped, and written on its label, in handwriting that looked exactly like mine, "For the next listener." I don't know how long I sat on that cold archive floor, staring at the tape that had slid off the shelf. Minutes? Hours? Time felt like it had been drained from the room. All I knew was that the air had grown still, unnaturally still, the kind of stillness that follows something violent, or sacred, or forbidden. Eventually, instinct dragged me to my feet. Not logic, not courage, instinct. The kind a person gets when they know they're being watched, and I was certain I could feel eyes on me, not from any one direction, but from all directions at once, as if the room itself had grown 100 unseen faces. I left the audio lab without looking back. Every hair on my arm stood rigid, every breath a battle against the crushing pressure around me. It felt like walking through thick water, the hallway bending inward. The silence followed me, clinging to my clothes like smoke. When I stepped outside, the sky was just beginning to turn pale with morning light. But campus wasn't waking up. No birds, no footsteps, no car engines. Just a soft ringing in the air, too faint to be a bell, too persistent to be imagination. It hung above the buildings like a thin thread, shimmering in the early dawn. I made it as far as the courtyard before stopping. The bell tower stood there in its usual place, dark and crooked against the morning sky. But something was wrong with it. It looked different, taller, narrower, as though the bricks had shifted during the night, folding inward like a living spine arching in anticipation. A thin crack ran down the center of the boarded door, wider now than before. Something pale glimmered behind it, something moving. My chest tightened. I wanted to leave, to run, to pretend none of this had happened, but my feet stayed planted, rooted to the ground. And then, slowly, gently, the boards pressed outward. Not breaking, breathing. A cold whisper slid across the courtyard, brushing my ear as softly as falling dust. "We're ready for you." I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The air behind me thickened, pressing me forward. The tower felt closer with every step I took. My heart hammered like it was trying to break free. Then another sound, soft, familiar. Footsteps, but not mine. I turned. A figure stood behind me. A man, tall, thin, clothes from another era, soaked and mold-stained. His face pale, eyes hollow, mouth slightly open like he was trying to speak but had forgotten how. Professor Hale. He lifted a shaking hand, pointing toward the tower. "They're waiting." Before I could move, his body dissolved, not like smoke, not like fading light, but like a voice being swallowed by silence itself. He simply wasn't there anymore. The bell tolled once, twice, 3 times. The air vibrated, my vision blurred. Something warm trickled from my nose. And then I heard it. My own voice, not from my throat, from the tower. "I'm here." My legs moved without me. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The boards parted. The darkness inside breathed out cold and thick. Voices rose from within, layered, trembling, hungry. I stepped inside. The board sealed behind me. Weeks later, the campus reopened. Students returned. Life continued. Except the caretaker reported something odd. Every night, around 3:12 a.m., the bell tower hummed. Not loudly, just enough for those paying attention to notice. And if you listened closely through the static of the night air,
If you heard the bells, you're already part of the story. Subscribe to the Silent Screams. Your next nightmare begins soon.